Hi there. Well, we're going to finish this chapter up so that you can take the test. And I'm combining 6.6 and 6.7, which has some story problems in them. So we're going to go ahead and go through those. And I'm also going to go through a few of the homework problems. So that might help some of you as well. All right, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started on this example here. And again, this up here is just talking about translating, and which is this first one. You know, pictures. You know, if you can draw a picture, which we'll demonstrate in some of these others. All right, so let's talk about this first example. The square of a number minus the number is 20. Find the numbers. All right, not a lot of reading there, but this sentence represents an equation. You know, you do have the word is, so you have an equation, not an expression. We'll go ahead and read it from left to right. You just have to be careful if you ever have words like less than or subtracted from. That's when you switch the order. But we don't have those, so we can just translate left to right. So we have the square of a number. Now you have to pick a variable. Let's call it n. So we're going to n squared. The square of a number is n squared. If we had the cube of a number, we'd have n cubed. Minus the number n. Okay, we don't know what it is. So we have the square of a number minus subtraction, the number is equal 20. So we obviously have a polynomial here, and we're going to go through our rules in order to solve it. So once you translate it into an equation, you can solve it. Our first step is to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to move the 20 over. So now we just go through all the steps that we've been going through in this chapter. So we have n squared minus n, making sure it's in the right order, n squared, n to the first, and then a number here, 20. And then we're going to factor it and break it into groups, and one of those groups has to be 0. Well, we need two, I'm going to put it over here. We need two numbers multiplied together that give you this, and added together give you a -1. So we've got, for 20, you could do 20 times 1. One of them has to be a negative. So we'll make the bigger one negative. Okay, that gives you 20, but when you add them, you don't get a -1. So then you're going to try another set in order to, excuse me, I need to. Okay, so we know that -20 and the 1 doesn't work, so you could try -10 times 2. Add them together, you don't get the -1, but multiplied, sure, you get that. And then there's the -5 times 4. Why am I making the largest one negative? Because I know that when I add them, I want a negative. So the larger one had to be negative. And sure enough, when you multiply these together, some of you may have realized that right away, that it was going to be these two combined, multiplied together, give you the last term, added, give you that -1. So we can factor n times n is n squared. See, if there's a number in front, you just have to try a bunch of different combinations. -5 and +4. And we get the -20, and -5n and 4n is a -1n. So now we have two numbers, all right, because you notice, find the number of the numbers. That could work. We have n minus 5 equals 0, n plus 4 equals 0. One of those has to be 0 in order for the product to be 0. Add 5, n equals 5, subtract 4, n equals a -4. So the numbers that would work, that would fit this equation, if you were to square 5, 25 minus 5 is 20. A -4 squared is 16. Oh, I guess we better try them both. Yeah, -16 minus a -4 is a +20. So because -4 squared is a positive 16. I want to make sure I didn't say negative. When you square a negative, you get a positive. So 16 minus a -4 is 20. So they both work. With some of these story problems, you're going to have to check and make sure that the answers make sense, that they would work. And we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, let's look at another one. A rectangular table is 4 times as long as it is wide. If the area is 196 square feet, find the length and width of the table. In something like this, I really encourage a picture. We have a width. When you do these, you need everything to be in terms of W or L's. So you want the same variable for these. And that's why they told you that a rectangular table is 4 times as long as it is wide. In other words, the length is 4 times the width. All right, so here the length is 4 times the width, even though they kind of said it in a strange way. That's what they mean here. So rather than having a length, an L, I'm going to put a 4W. So when you do these, you can only have one variable for these dimensions, for your area equations. So this one, goes here. So your length is 4W. The length is 4 times the width. Now then, this next sentence, if the area is 196, well, the area is length times width. So I'm going to multiply these two together. So the area is length times width. And in our case, it's 4W. I'm going to use parentheses, times W. Okay, so that's our area. Length times width, and it's equal to 196. So our area is this. Length times width is 196, or 4W squared is 196, multiplying that together. There's no plus sign or minus sign, so don't use the distributive property. You just take the 4 times the 1, and then you add exponents. Now, there's other ways of solving this, which we're going to talk about in chapter 10. But for right now, we're going to set it equal to 0. We're going to follow the process that we've learned. If you know another method, that's fine. Minus 196 equals 0. Okay. Factor out a 4. Okay, look for the greatest common factor here. So W squared minus 49. Okay, factoring out 4 times W squared is 4W squared. 4 times 49 is 196. And to get the 49, just take 196 divided by 4. And that would give you the 49. That does not... Oh, my battery's going. One moment, please. Plug this in. Got to do that. Okay. Awesome. All right. It just was kind of looking very faint. Now, so now that we have, we've got greatest common factor, I'm going to move it over here. Oops, forgot the 4. Equals 0. We factor this right here. It's a difference of 2 squares. So that tells us we have WW. What gives you 49? 7 times 7, one's plus and one's minus. That way the middle term comes out to be 0. Minus 7W and a positive 7W is 0. There's no middle term. All righty. So then we solve. In order for this to be 0, 4 will never be 0. There's no variable, so you can ignore it. W plus 7 equals 0, W minus 7 equals 0. One of these numbers has to be 0 so that the product is 0. So W subtracts 7. So you have W is a negative 7, add 7, W is 7. Okay, so I have two possibilities. Negative 7 if the width is a negative 7. Okay, so this is where you have to go back. Whenever you have these story problems, especially when it deals with distances, we know that negative 7 feet doesn't make any sense. So we can't have a negative for a width. So this one is not a part of the solution. The only solution we have is 7. So if you were to take 4 times 7, you get 28 times 7 gives you 196. So so W is equal to 7. And it's 7 feet. That's the units on ours, because we had square, oops, I didn't see that, square feet here, so then we have feet. So it's not, it's not too bad. I think probably the hardest part is coming up with that right there. They might say that the width is the length is 5 more than the width. That would be 5 plus W or W plus 5. So you just kind of interpret. Most of the time they kind of mess with the length. Not always, but most of the time. You find the length in terms of W is how that's read. And then you find the area. Notice my area only has a single type variable, was W's only. They told us what it is. Simplified, set it equal to 0, took out the greatest common factor, factored. And sometimes you'll throw out an answer, negative 7. It works in the equation, but doesn't make sense in the real life situation. All righty. Okay. Let's go on to another one here. And then we're going to look at a couple of the homework problems that I don't have examples for in the notes, but we can talk about them. I ran off a homework example. All right, for certain people suffering an extreme allergic reaction, the drug epinephrine is sometimes prescribed. The number of micrograms in T, all right, so in an adult bloodstream, T minutes after an injection is given by the formula N of T. This T just tells you that your equation over here is in terms of T. That's the only variable you've got. And that N represents the number of micrograms, and T is minutes. How long? So again, we're looking for the T. How long after an injection will there be 210 micrograms in the blood? So what they gave you is the N. They gave you this right here. So they want to know when. So you're going to solve it for T. When is the, let's see, what am I looking for? Yeah. All right, when is the number of micrograms in the bloodstream equal to that? So we'll take our minus 10T squared plus 100T, and this is equal to, the N is 210. So that's what they gave you and asked for the T. What I'm going to do is, rather than move the 210 over, because we're going to set it equal to 0 and solve it, I'm going to move the negative 10T squared over here, because that makes it positive. I always want that leading coefficient to be positive on the highest power. So we're going to add a positive 10T squared to both sides. And I'm going to add a negative 100T to both sides. So over here, putting them in order, 10T squared minus 100T plus 210. So I just kind of moved everything over to the left. And so I don't have to factor out a negative. All right, so we've set it equal to 0. So we started out with our equation. Okay, when does it equal this much? The n is 210. I brought everything over. Okay, now I'm going to start my factoring process. It's in order, set equal to 0, greatest common factor. Because they all end in 0, I know that 10 will go into all of them evenly. So this divided by 10 is this. 100 divided by 10 is 10. This divided by this is 21. And you factor it and solve it. Now, 21. The only two possibilities is 21 and 1, but 21 and 1 do not give you the 10. They have to have the same sign, so you'll be adding them. So it must be 7 and 3. And again, these added together will give you the 10. So it looks like I found the numbers for my last spot. T, 7 and 3, or 3 and 7, doesn't matter the order. I want them both to be negative, because a negative times a negative is a positive, but when you combine those, after you multiply and multiply, you'll get your negative 10. So it looks like I have two possibilities. So the 10 has no variable, we'll just ignore it. 10 minus 7 equals 0, 10 minus 3 equals 0. Add 7, add 3. So it looks like there are 2 times, because neither one of them are negative, so they both make sense. You can have positive times. 7 minutes and 3 minutes. Okay, how can we have 2 times when the concentration would be 210? Well, we're going to graph this. I'm just going to kind of graph it. I'm only going to use the positive, because you can't have negative times or negative amounts in your blood. If you were to graph this, this is 10. This is 0. This is about 300 micrograms, mgs. No, mcg. Sorry, mcg. All right. So what happens is that at 210 micrograms, here at 3 minutes on the way up, then you go up to 250. It's right about here. And then it comes back down at 7 minutes. So on the way up, you've got 210, it goes above, you cap at 250 at about 5 minutes, and then it comes down at 7 minutes, you're back at 210. So that's why you've got the 2 times, is those right there. So we've got 7 minutes and 3 minutes is when the concentration is 210 micrograms. Okay. All righty. Now we're going to look at some of the homework. You do not have this in your notes. This is just, I want to go through a couple of them. I want to go through number 15 with you. And I'm going to move this up, because we've kind of done some examples of the others, of 13 and 14. So this might help you. All right, so now we have a ball is thrown upward with an initial velocity of 48 feet per second from a height of 864 feet. Its height, h, in feet after t seconds is given by. All right, so all that before this equation just tells you how they came up with the equation. It really doesn't pertain, you don't really necessarily have to understand how they got all of these into here. All right, it's a physics type of a question to find out where this comes from. We're just going to use this. What you do need to know is that the t is in seconds on this side, and this h is in feet. All right, so this represents the height. The t's over here represent the time in seconds. All right, how long? So we're looking for time. We're going to be solving it for t. It looks like we're at the factor. How long will the ball, how long will the ball reach the ground? So what this tells you, that the height is 0. When it hits the ground, it's here, where the height is 0. So all we're going to do is take this equation and put the h will be a 0. Okay. I'm going to do that on a scratch piece of paper. So the height is 0. And we have it's negative 16. And so we're going to factor. And again, you see, looking at this right here, you could move everything over, oops, to the other side, or when we take out the greatest common factor, I'm going to take out a negative, whatever it comes out to be. And here, negative 16 goes into all of those. So if you're given a problem like this, take this big number and divide that by a negative 16 to see if you get an integer. Otherwise, I would have tried 8. 8 goes into both of these to see if it went into this, or a 2, and just start finding the largest number that you can divide those by. But I am going to take out a negative 16 because it does go into all of them. This divided by this is t squared. 48 divided by a negative 16 is a negative 3t. This divided by a negative 16 is a negative 54. Now, let's go ahead and if you multiplied this, you get a negative 16. A negative times a negative is a positive. 48. A negative times a negative is a positive, 868. So we can factor. And in doing that, what multiplied together gives you a negative 54. Signs are opposite, but added together gives you a negative 3. Well, it's going to be a negative 9 and 6. That's what multiplied together. You could try, obviously, 54 times 1 doesn't work. You could have divided it by 2 times something, 3 times something, just like divide this by 3. But these two work. So we've got negative 16, t, minus 9 plus 6. So let's go ahead, and in order for the product to be 0, one of these has to be 0 because this has no variable. So it is not part of the solution. Only if there's a variable would you have t equals 0. All right. So then you add 9. T equals 9, 9 seconds. Subtract 6, negative 6 seconds. Well, because we're dealing with time and we don't have a negative for time, so therefore this is discounted. You don't use it. The answer is just the t equals 9 seconds. Okay, so that's kind of how you would do number 15. We're going to look at one other one. I'm going to be done with that. And that's number 17. This one is kind of like I did the table. 16 is kind of like the table one. I think that you can kind of figure that out, but 17 is a little bit different. So we're going to look at 17. Here, a picture frame measures 18 by 40. So they did the picture for you, which is really nice. On the outside, and 504 square centimeters. Whenever you've got square centimeters, you've got an area of the picture shows. So they gave you the area of the blue is what you've got, is the area of the blue. And they want the width of the frame. And the frame is the same width all the way around. So all of this yellow is the same width, and that's what they want. They want this X distance. The important thing here is, where did they come up with this blue length here? Well, I know this is 40, and if you subtract this X and this X, that's why we have a minus 2X, you have this length of blue. This is 18, so to get this distance, you take the 18 and subtract this X and that X. That's why you've got a 2X. So I just want to make sure you understood where that 2X came from. I know that the area of the blue is 504. So we've got the area of the blue is 504 square centimeters. I also know that area is length times width. So I know that the area is length times width, which is our length and our width. That's the length times the width. And I know that that is equal to 500, oh, not 5,004, 504. Length times width is equal to 5,4. They told us that the blue was 504. So let's solve this beast right here. Now, it's not set equal to 0. All right, so you just can't set those equal to 0 and solve it. It is not going to work. You're going to have to multiply them together, bring the 504 over, and refactor. All righty, so that's what we're going to start out with. We're going to go ahead and multiply the these two together. So 40 times 18 is 720. Then we've got, I'm going to move it down. I'm going to erase the bottom of my box here. So the first times the first using the FOIL. And then the outside, which is 40x, 80x, sorry. And then the inside gives you 36x. Forgot the 0 on the 80 there. And when you combine these, oh, they're both negative. -2 times that, -36, -80, add them, -116x. The last times the last is a positive 4x squared. So I'm going to set it equal to 0. I'm going to rearrange it, put the x squared first, and then refactor. So I'm going to subtract 504 from both sides. So I have 0 equals, I'll write the 4x squared first, and then I'll have the minus 116x. This right here is 216 positive. When you add those two together, equals 0. So I rearranged it. I combined the 720 and the minus 504, and we're ready to factor. Good, you can still see it. So to factor, now that it's set equal to 0 and put in the right order, we take out the greatest common factor, which is a 4. This divided by this, x squared. This is a minus 29 plus 54. Wow, it does end up to be 54 again, equals 0. So I took out the greatest common factor. Now we're going to find two numbers multiplied together that give you 54, but added together, because I will be adding, they have the same sign, give you 29. Well, we know we have 9 times 6. We used that in the last one. But when you add those together, actually, they'll both be negatives, won't they? Because you want a negative 29. You get a negative 15. All right, so it's not going to be those two. What else gives you 54? Well, since it ends in 2, 2 times 54 divided by 2 is 27. And when you add those, you get negative 29. So you found the group that worked. If not, I would have gone 3 times. Let's see, 3 divided by that gives me what, 18? Yeah. But again, when you add those together, you don't get that. So you just kind of keep going down the line until you find the right combination. And in this case, we did on the second time. So we've got 4 x times x. We've got a minus 27 and a minus 2, or minus 2 and a minus 27. The order doesn't matter. Multiply, give us the last term. Negative 27x when you multiply, negative 2x when you multiply, gives you the negative 29x. Missing my x there. All righty. So we'll set both of those equal to 0 because there's no variable out here, so we don't have to look at it to solve it. Add 27 to both sides, add 2 to both sides. So we have 2 possibilities. Now, do they both make sense? Well, they're both positives, but let's look at the 27 first. If we go back up here, if the width of the frame is 27, you really have no picture because it would exceed this. So you'd have 27 inches on this side, and you know it's bigger than the 18. So, and if you were to put the 27 in here, you're going to get a negative as far as a width. Or if you put a 27 into here, you're going to get a negative length. So the 27 does not work. It's just the 2. The 2 is the only one that makes sense. So that's the solution for that one. Okay, well, I hope that helps with those story problems, giving you some samples to follow. Now what we have is just a little bit more practice on some factoring. I'm just kind of going through the steps, making sure that you've got them. We'll go through a few of these. We may not go through all of them. But let's go ahead and practice a little bit more on the factoring in case you're still having some trouble. The first step, arrange it, which it is, decreasing power. And then the next step is the greatest common factor, which we will pull out, which is a 5. So this divided by 5 is t to the 4th. 80 divided by 5 is 16. Okay. So multiply to come back to the original. Don't stop, because if you do, then you'll get it wrong. So here we looks like we have a difference of 2 squares. So t and t. T squared times t squared gives you t to the 4th. We'll have 4 times 4 gives you 16. When you're missing that middle term, these have to be equal in here, but opposite. All right. Are we done? Well, this one is done. We consider that a prime. T squared plus 4. We're done with that one. But this one can be broken down because it's a difference of 2 squares. So we have our 5 t squared plus 4. That just kind of drops down. We're done with that one. So t times t is t squared. 2 times 2 is 4 minus plus. Okay. And now we've completed the factoring at that point. Greatest common factor, a difference of 2 squares, a difference of 2 squares. Okay, let's look at the next one. We have 4 terms, so we're going to do grouping. We'll group these first two and we'll group the last two. There's not a minus, so I don't have to change any signs. I just keep everything. Okay, we'll pull out the greatest common factor. In this case, it's a 2 and an x squared. The common factor, the common variable, we use the smaller one. This divided by this, 2x cubed divided by 2x squared is x, plus 10 divided by 2 is 5, x squared times x squared is 1. Multiply it and come back to the original. And that works. Okay, within this group and this group is an x plus 5. So I'm going to pull it out. You see, there's nothing here to pull out, so I just drop down. If I take this out of this first part, in other words, this divided by this, these cancel, and you're left with 2x squared. Plus x plus 5 divided by x plus 5 is 1. This times 1 is this. Can you factor it further? Well, you've got a squared, but and you have the two terms, but it's a plus, and so it's not, you cannot factor that anymore. It's not a difference of 2 squares. It's really not even a sum of 2 squares, because that would have to be a 4. So you could go 2x times 2x, but it is not going to work because of the sum. So you're done. Okay, there's your answer. Now this next one, okay, here I would multiply. Well, actually, they're in the right order, but I would take out a negative because of that leading term is negative, and an n cubed, the smallest of what's in common. N to the 5th divided by n cubed is going to be positive, and it's going to be n squared. And then this 2n to the 4th divided by this will be a minus 2n. Okay? Subtracting the exponents. And it's a negative because a positive over a negative is a negative. 35 divided by a negative n cubed, it's going to be a negative 35. The n cubes cancel. Again, if you were to multiply this, adding exponents, you are going to come back to the original. And remember, negative times a negative is a positive, and negative times a negative is a positive. Can you factor what's left? Well, it's a trinomial. It could. What multiplied together gives you a negative 35, but added together gives you a negative 2. I'd say a negative 7 times 5. Okay. That would give you the negative 2. So we have a negative n cubed, n times n, minus 7 plus 5. We're not setting it equal to 0, so we're done. We're just factoring. And you do get the negative 2n. Okay, let's look at D. On this one right here, whenever I see like 100 or I see 49 or 16, I'm always going to try, like if it's 16, 4 and 4. If it's 49, 7 and 7. This is 100, so I'm going to try the 10 and 10. It's called a perfect trinomial square. Hopefully it works. They have to have the same sign, but they're both going to be negative when I add them together. Looks like it's going to work. X times x is x squared, minus 10, multiplied, give you a positive 100, multiply those, and you get the negative 20. So my answer is x minus 10 squared. Okay, perfect. let's see what we have on the other page. Just a second. So looking at the next page, let's look at E kind of briefly. Again, I think it looks more complicated than it is. You pull out the greatest common factor here. In this case, it's going to be a 3 because 3 goes into 6, 21, and 3. Okay. They all have an x squared, x cubed. Oh, yep, no, I thought maybe I could combine those first and third terms. So they have an x squared and x cubed, so I'll pull out an x squared. Y to the 4th, y to the 5th, y to the 6th. I'll do a y to the 4th, that's the smallest. So when you take this divided by this, you're going to get 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then the squares cancel, the y to the 4ths cancel because they when you subtract them, you get a 0, which is anything to the 0 power is 1. So if you multiply this, you'll come back. All right, a negative 21 divided by 3 is a negative 7. X cubed, x squared, subtract exponents, y to the 5th, y to the 4th, you get y. Okay. And then here, 3 divided by 3 is a plus 1. The x squareds cancel, and it looks like you're going to have a y squared. All right, let's double check. So if you were to multiply, yes, you come back to the original. Can this be factored? This one cannot. You know, first off, you have the x, and there's not an x squared over here. So this, on this problem, you would be done. You just took out the greatest common factor and you're done. All right, it cannot be factored any further. You can't get that middle x term there. We'll do one where you can later here. So you're done. Just factor out the greatest common factor. Awesome. Now this next one, when you're given x to the 6 minus 64, you could use the difference of 2 cubes. But when you're given something like this, use the difference of 2 squares first. So what I mean, well, x cubed times x cubed, can you read that? It looks like a 3, I suppose, gives you x to the 6th. Okay, if you want to know how to get the 3, just take 6 divided by 2. Minus 8 plus 8. Okay. And that gives you the minus 64, and the middle term drops out because you multiply positive 8x cubed, multiply negative 8x cubed for the OI and FOIL, and your middle term is 0. But if you stopped here, you would miss these because this is a difference of 2 cubes. So we're going to follow the formula, a cubed minus b cubed. I guess I'll just put it under here and we can write it later, is going to be a minus b, a squared plus ab plus b squared. This one is the sum of 2 cubes. We can't do the difference of 2 cubes or the sum of 2 squares. We can't do the sum of 2 squares like we did on the previous page with the x squared plus 4, but you can do the sum of 2 cubes. And that's a plus b, a squared minus ab. Got to have a negative somewhere in the formula. It's only one. All right. So we're going to fill those in. What's the a and what's the b? Well, the a in both cases is an x. That's what you're cubing. And the b in both cases is a 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So I fill these in to factor this one. I take x minus 2. And then I square the x plus 2 times x plus 4. I square the b. Over here, I've got x plus 2, square the x, multiply the a and the b, so you get minus 2x, and then you square the b. And then you're done. So if this were set equal to 0, we would only do this one and this one. These are not going, we're not going to deal with these until later. So you just have those two right here as far as being factorable and solving. Okay, great. Let's see. We're going to skip over to H because G and H. G, just make sure you take out a minus. Well, no, you can't take out anything there. So other than just a -1 to make those positive. Let's go ahead and try it. We may as well. You can skip it if you think you got it. So we have a -1, or just a minus. You don't have to put the 1 there. 25 m squared. They had no common variable and not a number that comes in. Oops, that's going to be a positive. Negative times a positive is a negative. And this will also be a positive. 4 n squared. Okay. All right. So these right here is actually a perfect square trinomial that I'm going to try. 5 times 5 gives me this. 2 times 2 gives me this. So I'm going to try that. And until you write it down, because you've got a 5m times 5m gives you that term. 2n times 2n gives you that term. Because we have this number in front of our leading term, you can't just work with this. You got to write it all out and try it and erase if it doesn't work. Plus and plus. Multiply and multiply, and you get 20. So it works. So you're done. There's your factoring right there. And so it wasn't really that bad. And you've got the two variables. Now with H, I think that may have been a typo because I really don't think you have, no, this will work. No, it's not. Let's go ahead and try it. Look for the greatest common factor, which there is none. They don't have a common variable. There's not a number that goes into all three evenly other than 1. So we're going to set up our parentheses. xy times xy gives you x squared y squared. That's probably the hardest part of this. What multiplied together gives you 12. And added together gives you 7. Well, it's 6 and 2 gives you 8. So I know it's not 6 times 2. That gives you an 8 when you add. 4 times 3 gives you the 7. Plus 4 and plus 3. Okay. And so you can check it. 3xy when you multiply. 4xy when you multiply gives you 7xy. So you're done factoring. It worked. All right, let's look at our last one here. Greatest common factor. Let's see, I believe 4. We'll go into all of those evenly. Let's see what I've got. I thought I had looked at that, but so we're going to divide. Okay, they're in order. Power, decreasing power. They all have an x, but we're going to go ahead and let's divide them all by 4. So we factor out a 4. How about a 4x? Almost forgot the x because they all have an x and the smallest is x to the first. This divided by 4x is 5x squared. So multiply, you come back. Minus this x squared divided by the 4's cancel. So we'll have just an x. Multiply, come back. minus 16. And when you divide that, and the x's cancel. So we have, I'm going to erase this and make this 4x clear. Now, when you do this, when you factor this right here, you could use the Xbox method if you wanted to. So 5 times 16 gives you 80. And then -1. Actually, it'll be a -80 when you multiply them together. And then you would just start, 1 times 80. Make one of them negative, probably the biggest one. You get -79. And you can just start. 3 does not go into it. 4 does. 5 does. 6 does not. 7 does not. And then 8. So you would just multiply until you came up with the right combination. Oh, okay. I was just looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, this is 18, not 16. All right, because I thought, wow, none of these are going to work. When I was going through it, I'm like, so this would actually be 18. So rather than 80, it's 18. Sorry about that. It's 90, which actually makes it quite easy. I knew something was wrong when I was looking. I'm like, okay, sorry. So what multiplied together gives you a -90, but added together gives you a -1. Well, it's -10 times 9. Okay. You could have tried, the whole list like we were doing with the 80 and coming down and thinking, okay, something's wrong here. It's not working. So here you've got a -10 and a 9. So we've got the 4x out front. We'll put in 5x and 5x, a -10 and a +9 goes in that spot. This one can be reduced because 5 goes into both of those. X -2, 5, this one can't be reduced. Okay. So that was kind of a review, little snafu there at the beginning, but that's a review of the Xbox, which we haven't reviewed in a while. Okay. Or you could have just used trial and error for these to come up with these. 5x and x to get this. 18, you could have done 6 and 3, 18 and 1, 9 and 2. Put them in these spots till you got the right combination. Or 5 times -18 is a -90, and then just found that combination and set it up that way. All right, again, sorry about the 18. Well, that does it. So now you have the information you need for the test, and I'll go ahead and I'll open that up here pretty soon. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.